The market square bustled with the usual Thursday morning cacophony. Farmers hawked their wares, children chased pigeons. Life in that moment was utterly ordinary. Then the old man appeared. He stood silently, a frail silhouette against the backdrop of the clock tower. His clothes, though worn, hinted at a forgotten elegance. A tattered scarf concealed most of his face, but a shock of white hair like spun moonlight escaped its confines. He clutched a leather briefcase, its surface worn smooth with age. It seemed to hum with an energy that crackled in the air, drawing hesitant glances from passers-by. Curiosity, like a gentle breeze, began to stir the crowd. People stopped, their conversations dying on their lips as they turned towards the enigmatic figure. The old man remained still, his presence a silent question mark in the heart of the square. Whispers, like startled birds, began to flit through the assembled townsfolk. Who was this stranger? Where had he come from? His sudden appearance, devoid of fanfare or announcement, was unsettling. The normalcy of the market had been punctured, replaced by an unnerving curiosity. A young boy, emboldened by youthful daring, edged closer to the old man. His mother, fear flickering in her eyes, quickly pulled him back. The old man's gaze, hidden behind the depths of the scarf, seemed to sweep over the crowd. It lingered for a moment on the boy and his mother, and a faint smile, like the ghost of a summer breeze, touched his lips. The briefcase, clutched tightly in his hand, seemed to pulse with a faint inner light. It drew the eye, that briefcase, like a moth to a flickering candle flame. What secrets, people wondered, did it hold? Then, with the slow deliberateness of age, the old man spoke. His voice, a raspy whisper that seemed to carry the weight of centuries, silenced the crowd. "I have come," he began, each word a pebble dropped into the still waters of their anticipation, "to tell you a story." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle upon the hushed square. The briefcase he placed gently at his feet. It seemed to sigh as it touched the cobblestones, a sound only he seemed to hear. "A story," he continued, his pale hand rising to grip the worn leather handle of time itself. A collective gasp rippled through the square. Time? What could this stranger, this apparition in the morning sun, possibly know of time? His fingers, gnarled with age, fumbled with the clasps of the briefcase. Inside, nestled amongst yellowed parchment and aged blueprints, lay an intricate hourglass. Its sands, a luminous silver, were nearly depleted. "I built it, you see," the old man murmured, his voice barely audible above the sudden hush of the crowd. "Time! It was my creation." He held the hourglass aloft, and the townsfolk swore they could feel a subtle shift in the air, a quickening, as if the world itself held its breath. "But even the grandest of designs," he continued, his eyes, now visible above the edge of the scarf, shimmering with a terrible knowledge, must eventually meet their end. The last grains of silver sand slipped through the narrow neck of the hourglass, and a profound silence descended upon the square. The silence stretched, thin and taut, like a wire about to snap. The air was thick with an unspoken tension, a collective breath held in anticipation of something dreadful. Then the first cry rang out, piercing the heavy silence like a knife through fabric. "The end!" A woman shrieked, her voice high with terror, echoing off the metallic walls of the square. "He's saying it's the end!" Another voice joined in, adding to the growing cacophony of fear. Panic, like a wildfire given wind, swept through the crowd. It spread rapidly, igniting every heart with a primal fear. People surged back from the old man, their faces etched with fear and disbelief. They stumbled over each other in their haste to escape. The market stalls, moments ago bustling with commerce, were overturned in the rush. Goods scattered across the ground, trampled underfoot. Mothers clutched their children, their eyes wide with terror. They shielded them from the chaos, their protective instincts kicking in. Men swore under their breaths, their faces pale. They looked around frantically, searching for a way out. The old man watched the unfolding chaos with a strange detachment, as if he were observing a play, a familiar tragedy unfolding on a well-trodden stage. His eyes were distant, almost resigned. He made no move to stop the panic, no attempt to soothe the growing hysteria. His presence was both a beacon and a curse. He simply stood there, the hourglass with its empty chambers still clutched in his hand, a silent harbinger of their collective doom. The sands of time had run out, and with it, their hope. But even in the face of such pronouncements, doubt, like a stubborn weed, can take root. "He's mad!" a voice boomed from the back of the crowd. It was the blacksmith, a burly man with arms thicker than oak trees. "Don't listen to his ramblings!" Others, their initial terror giving way to a flicker of hope, began to echo the sentiment. "Aye, he's just a crazy old man. He's probably after our coin," a woman shouted, her voice shrill with suspicion, "trying to scare us into giving him what he wants." The old man listened to their disbelief, a flicker of something akin to sadness crossing his features. He knew better than anyone that the truth, however fantastical, rarely found fertile ground in the hearts of those unwilling to believe. But was he truly mad, or was he the only sane one left? "Is there—" A young woman's voice, hesitant yet resolute, pierced the din. Her words cut through the noise, a beacon of clarity in the midst of confusion. "Is there anything we can do?" The question, so simple yet so profound, hung in the air. It was a question that everyone had been too afraid to ask, yet it was on everyone's mind. It seemed to momentarily still the chaos, to offer a lifeline of hope in the face of impending doom. The crowd, once frantic and disoriented, began to calm, their eyes searching for answers. All eyes turned towards the source of the question. It was as if the entire city held its breath, waiting for a sign, a direction, a glimmer of hope. It was the baker's daughter, a young woman known throughout the town for her kindness and her unwavering optimism. She had always been a beacon of light in the community, her smile a source of comfort. The old man looked at her, a long, searching look. His eyes, weary from years of hardship, seemed to find something in her gaze that he had long forgotten. In her eyes he saw not fear, but a desperate yearning for understanding, for a way out of the encroaching darkness. Her determination was palpable, a silent promise that they would find a way. For the first time since his arrival, a flicker of hope, fragile as a newborn star, ignited within him. It was a small spark, but it was enough to light the way forward. Perhaps, just perhaps, it wasn't too late. The old man felt a renewed sense of purpose, a belief that they could still make a difference. Perhaps there was still a chance, however slim, to rewrite the ending of this story. The future was uncertain, but with hope they could face whatever came their way.
Shush!
He raised a hand, silencing the murmurs of the crowd. The air was thick with anticipation, every eye fixed on him, waiting for his words. "Time," he said, his voice regaining a measure of its former strength, "is a fickle thing. It slips through our fingers like sand, yet it can also be our greatest ally. It can be a cruel master, but it can also be a forgiving teacher. Each moment is a lesson, each second a chance to learn and grow." He gestured towards the clock tower, its shadow stretching long across the cobblestones. The tower stood as a silent witness to the passage of time, a reminder of both past and future. Each tick of the clock is a new beginning, a chance to make amends, to right wrongs, to choose a different path. Every tick is a heartbeat, a pulse of life that offers hope. "The end is not yet upon us," he continued, his gaze sweeping over the faces of the townsfolk, "but it draws near. We must act now, while there is still time. The choice now is yours. Will you stand idle, or will you take action? The future is in your hands. Will you succumb to fear? Will you let the shadows of doubt cloud your judgment and paralyze your will? Or will you seize the precious moments that remain and write a different ending to this story? Will you rise to the challenge and shape your destiny?" He placed the hourglass back into his briefcase, the leather creaking softly. The sands of time were still flowing, but the outcome was yet to be determined. The fate of the town, he knew, rested not on his shoulders, but on theirs. Their collective will and courage would decide the future. A hush fell over the town square, heavier than the silence that had preceded it. The townspeople, their faces etched with a mixture of fear, doubt, and a newfound determination, looked at one another. The old man's words, enigmatic and unsettling, had planted a seed of uncertainty in their hearts. The clock on the tower chimed, a stark reminder of the passage of time. What would they do with the time they had left? Would they succumb to the panic that threatened to consume them? Or would they find the strength within themselves to face the unknown, to forge a new path in the face of oblivion? The old man, his purpose seemingly served, melted back into the crowd, becoming another shadow in the bustling square. The story he knew was no longer his to tell. It was now in their hands. The 11th hour had arrived.